Hello and welcome to Hornbill TV, and in today's special program and presentation we have a very esteemed guest, a diplomat with vast experience. He is and was the Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev has had a 35-year diplomatic career, spending 11 years in countries like Algeria, Norway and Nigeria. He is currently president of the Eco Diplomacy 7 Strategies, a consultancy in Delhi. He is also President of India, President of the Asian African Chamber of Commerce, amongst others. Sir actually has a long list of accolades to his name, but today we will be speaking on India's growing reputation as a serious global power, its dynamic relation with the Middle East or West Asia, and also a little about India's look and Act East policy. First of all, thank you so much, sir, for joining us on Hornbill TV, and welcome to Nagaland, sir.
Kanika Ashe,
sir.
say your viewers, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, sir, for gracing us with your presence. Also, so before we actually get into the real talk, were you able to visit the Hornbill Festival, sir?
Yes, I came to Nagaland for my first visit, curious about Hornbill Festival.
All right.
And I was not disappointed. I was in fact very enthused. It was a colorful display of vibrant Naga culture, its positivity, and its ethos ranging from emotions like war, dance, to weddings, and to babies, and so on and so forth. So it gave a comprehensive cultural outlook in a short capsule.
All right. So, I mean, there's one thing that I actually want to ask. So, you've spent 35 years in service. I mean, exemplary service. You've been abroad as an ambassador to Nigeria, Norway, and also Algeria. So, what is it that you get to do a little more frequently these days that you couldn't while being in service?
Oh, a lot. I can swim. I can cycle around. These are two passions. I also write for the media. I am a regular on some televisions focused on international events, and I write for newspapers as well. I've published 2 books on doing business with Nigeria and doing business with the UAE. These have been successful and have been sort of accepted as source books on these 2 very important countries. So I keep myself busy, and I've taken a week off to visit Northeast. My first visit here. It's a shame that at age of 69 one has to say this, but it's better late than never. I leave for Shillong just now, and I'll stay there for 4 or 5 days, speak on 2 different occasions at IIM Shillong on oil politics in India, and in Indian Institute for Social Studies, Indian Council for Social Studies and Research. I'll speak on tribalism in Middle East and in Africa. You think you are the tribals here in Northeast, there are tribals elsewhere as well, and tribal forces, their emotions, their network is important determinant all over the world.
All right, so basically sir has just given us a gist of the conversation we're going to be having in this particular presentation and program. Well, sir is an expert of the Middle East and the politics and the geopolitics behind it. So before we focus on the Middle East, a little more to focus on the Northeast. So, and this would be my first question, in the sense that in the year 1991, the Look East policy was formulated, in which India wanted to strengthen its relationship with the Southeast Asian countries. But in the year 2014, the Look East policy was superseded by the Act East policy. All right, so do you think this formulation of the Act East policy is in some way a block to tackle China's One Belt, One Road initiative?
Well, there is no dissonance between the two. and East, that is Southeast Asia,
Yes.
needs both India and China. It is a confluence of the two major civilizations that has impacted that region for historically, from Angkor Wat to Java. We've had Indian influence for centuries. Then you have Chinese influence much later, historically, and there are immigrants from both countries in this area. Malaysia has about 20% Indian ethnic group, and Singapore has similar numbers, and so on. Look East was not superseded, but was extended by Act East.
Yes.
There was more action, there was more dynamic, and the dynamic was aimed at creating economic dependencies on each other, creating networks, creating connectivities, and I think there were various factors that slowed it down, including COVID and Myanmar situation. But I think India is consistent in its aim that our Northeast in particular needs connections, trade, societal and otherwise, with the region towards the east, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, etc., which are dynamic, which are fast growing, and which could spur the development of this strategic region.
So, sir, I mean, it's an advantage if you look at it, because India is also part of the BIMSTEC bloc. And do you think the BIMSTEC is also going to actually flourish, because with the Act East policy, there's going to be more active and very strong participation of the northeastern states, according to the vision of the Act East policy. So, do you think that BIMSTEC would automatically bloom from the Act East policy?
I think that is the contention. I should also point out that creation of a separate ministry for Northeast region is a harbinger, and it links with the Act East policy, because Northeast needs to be strengthened by its own interconnections, its own infrastructure development, and its own societal developments. And reality of the situation is that none of the northeastern seven sisters are able to sustain themselves on domestic resources alone. They need substantive assistance from center. Earlier this assistance was piecemeal, episodical, etc. By creating a separate ministry, I think this is going to create a channel through which programs can be well choreographed, monitored, and implemented in a logical and mutually sustainable manner, in sort of cahoot with the politicians of this region, who would have their own priorities.
Yes.
Now, as far as BIMSTEC is concerned, I think it's a Bay of Bengal based initiative, and it has a lot of logical support. It's not getting involved into politics, which can be very messy, but BIMSTEC has countries with vastly different economic models. So, intermeshing them from India to Bangladesh to Myanmar to Singapore and Thailand, which are more dynamic, that would require a certain amount of working to do, and I think eventually it will take off.
All right, so in another feat for the Indian subcontinent, I mean, India took over the presidency of the G20 in December 1st, a few days back. So, sir, do you think by taking over the presidency of the G20, would this be the perfect platform for India to proclaim to all the global superpowers about its seriousness and the validity of the Act East policy? Do you think this would be the perfect platform for India to actually announce to the world?
I think you are absolutely right, Vito. We are, as a host of major events, including summit of G20 countries, we are entitled to invite our friends who are not members, and I'm sure we are going to include a number of Southeast Asian friends who have influence over the global situation and who are willing to contribute in that direction. So G20 presidency is in itself an acknowledgement of India's importance. We are, after all, in PPP terms, third largest economy in the world, in nominal terms fifth largest economy in the world, and we have a tradition of responsible international behavior. So I think it would reinforce our image. It would be an harbinger of our having arrived in the global scene. We never left the global scene, but Vishwaguru, as our Prime Minister wants us to be, would showcase our own priorities for the world, our own vision for the future of this humankind, and would therefore have long-term influence.
All right, sir. Now, moving towards the Middle East, where it holds your expertise. So, I mean, if you look at the bilateral trade between the West Asia and India, we could see a massive increase. In the year 2020 to 21, it was 154 billion. It increased. It was 87 billion, and in 20 to 21, it increased to about 154 billion. And also, now getting back to one of the articles that you had published, in which you had stated that India should not go for the CEPA, or rather the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with the UAE. You said that India should not join in haste. But when the bilateral trade figures show such a massive increase, what is there for India, and what should they take into matter for joining the CEPAs with haste?
Vito, I compliment you on being well informed, but I should also say that I was careful with my words.
Yes.
We should not do it in a haste. We should have an agreement, CEPA, which is more balanced and which does justice to our own economic priorities. Look, we have a tradition of having CEPAs earlier. I think 17 CEPAs were done before, and none of them succeeded, because very soon Indian exporters were overwhelmed. Our partners did not deliver on their promises to allow Indian experts, Indian professionals entry, etc., and they misused the CEPA agreements to become a conduit for foreign goods to be rebranded and sold in India on lower duties. So all that was the background under which I didn't want anything to be done in a hurry, because these hurried agreements would have the same results. And as you know, the definition of madness is to do same thing again and expect different outcome. So, but I think our negotiators were wiser, and they did not sign an omnibus agreement with a lot of countries. The focus now is one to one country, one FTA or one CEPA, and that seems to be succeeding. But much of the growth in trade that you have cited is because oil prices have gone up 60% during this year. So, since we are a major importer, world's third largest importer of crude, and much of it, in fact 2/3 of it nearly comes from this region. So, the figures have bloomed, but no thanks to any work being done on this, in this direction.
All right, sir. Now, coming towards coming to the global power scene, we've normally seen India to be a very dominant recipient whenever it used to take matters of international concern. It used to be very reserved in its opinion. But over the past few, let's call it a decade, we've seen a much more bolder, much more confident, much more decisive approach of the Indian government when it comes to its external affairs relations, like having bold approach to certain issues. So, how did this change come about, and also what are some of the reasons as to how the Indian government is now becoming bolder in its approach to international situations? And also, sir, do you think in this era India is turning out to be a new global superpower?
Vito, you've asked a very important question. I don't think anyone has straight answers. The dynamic in Indian foreign policy is based on various factors, including a popular government at home, which enjoys majority in the parliament, so it can speak with confidence without being contradicted by its junior partners or pulled back by opposition. It is taken more seriously as well, because the person who is articulating the policy enjoys the majority support in the parliament. Secondly, I should say that economically we have done much better than before, and the 7% growth rate that we have had for nearly 20 years is attracting global attention from investors, from people with Indian market in their crosswires as future sort of traders, etc., etc. The middle class has arrived in India and is making demands, from education abroad to buying cars to buying televisions and mobiles, etc. And all this has not gone unnoticed worldwide. When the demand in the West is near saturation, so all that has emboldened Indian policymakers. Our economic situation, our economic policies have been consistent and pragmatic. So, we have let us say 4th or 5th largest foreign exchange reserves. We have invested wisely in infrastructure. For example, 20% of our GDP has gone into infrastructure last year, which is how the roads and airports and other things are being developed. So, all that has given our policy makers the inner strength, and a country is taken seriously as a foreign policy player if its internal contradictions are resolved. So, we are in the process of resolving these internal contradictions over past 2 decades, and all this has emboldened our policy makers. There is a new sense of realism, pragmatism, without any colored glasses being worn about where our preferences ideologically are. Our ideological sort of scales are down and economic scales are up. So, which makes decision making fairly simple. Ideologically you can deter, but economically you have to take a decision where to get your oil from, where to get the technology from, where to when you have strategic issues, which country to ban imports from, etc., etc. So, these are relatively simpler decisions. And I think it's a refreshing to note that Indian foreign policy has finally arrived to serve the national interest in its purest form.
All right. So you were talking about the Indian foreign policy. One of the questions that I actually wanted to put forward to you was about our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar. He's been creating quite the waves because of his bold approach, and also how he has actually silenced the Western critics over India's business with Russia over its oil exports. So, sir, how would you fairly say that Mr. Jaishankar has taken the right approach by saying that India first needs to take care of its own economy first, and then will think about others? We've barely heard somebody actually speak like that on an international platform. So would you call this a very bold approach?
I think this is bold, all right, but at the same time it's a bare knuckle approach. You are not wearing velvet gloves, you are not bending backwards or forward to agree with the people who are trying to dictate terms. If you are flexible, veto, foreign powers owe it to themselves to press you. Meaning even India would like to press people if they are pressable. But if you know that your interlocutor has made up his mind, is unlikely to change, you then accept that fact and move on to something more cohesive, more dynamic and more agreeable. So, our tendency to agree to disagree has been highlighted, and this is we are within our rights to take decisions which are matter of national interest, and therefore it plain speaking by my colleague and one batch senior person, Mr. Jaishankar, is very welcome. And it has been now that die is cast as far as India is concerned, then the other side has to move on and to avoid creating further contradictions. So that in fact removes ambiguity, that removes doubts in the mind of our interlocutors, that India can be managed, or India should be pressed to change its policy, etc. And they reluctantly have accepted those kind of policies, which in heart of their heart they would like to change, but they know that the efforts would not be met with commensurate success.
All right, so now I'm going to take a point from your introductory answer, and this is about tribal politics. So normally there is a common conception about the power struggle in the Middle East. We think about only the emirs and the kings, but very little do we know about how the tribals out there actually control the political scene there. I mean, in Nagaland we call ourselves tribals, but we, even in our most common thought, we cannot believe they are tribal. So, sir, could you please give us a little introduction on the topic of how tribal politics actually plays a big role in the power that is retained in the Middle East?
Vito, it's difficult to answer this in precise, concise terms on a public forum, but consider the Gulf Cooperation Council states.
Yes.
The ruling dynasties represent their respective tribes.
Yes.
It's a pyramid of sort. At the top is the tribe that is ruling Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Kuwait or Oman or UAE, and these then they come associated tribes in the next tier of that structure, and then comes the masses. This is the same phenomenon in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is similar. So, the dynamic in Syria, for example, where Alawites are ruling over Sunnis, dynamic of Islamic State, where Sunnis consider a bigger tribe, tried to establish a Khilafate, and so on. One can go on and on. So, tribal structures play a very dominant role in these traditional societies. There is an overlay of modernity, there is an overlay of popular sort of support being witnessed, or religiosity of Islam being displayed by the tribal leaders. But at the essence, Al-Sauds or Al-Khalifa or Al-Thani or Sabah, Al-Sabah, etc. are basically emergent from the tribal structures.
So, basically, sir, how we could put it, the head of the clan is basically how he controls the power. Could you say it in simpler terms as that?
I think you put it reasonably well. The power gets to be concentrated on status quo lines. What is the status quo? Is supported by the authority and the paraphernalia of security services, police, judiciary, and even religious clergy. They support the structure, and I think it has become so sophisticated these days that these tribal based structures have become immutable. When have you heard of a coup in these tribally controlled countries? So, they are able to sort of evolve a policy of patronage, particularly when the resource like oil, etc., are highly priced and the incomes are good. Then they have more money for patronage, and this trickles down to the structure, pyramidal structure that I mentioned, and people are quite happy that their material situation is improving, and they are willing to countenance the status quo being perpetuated.
All right. So, there is actually a country of focus that I would like to wanted to ask you about, and that is the UAE, and also since you are an expert in that field. So, if we turn back pages of the history book, if you go towards the year 2007, 2008, that was the time when I think Dubai had its the real estate crash. But as you look today, it's one of the it's going to lead the economic boom. It's been predicted. So, sir, how did Dubai actually resurge, or rather they had a resurgence in the economy? So, how were they able to do it? Because if I'm not wrong, I mean, in the year 2007 and 8, UAE had literally put in all the resources into developing real estate, and now today, basically Dubai's economy and the UAE economy, Dubai supports UAE's economy, and the chunk of the economy depends on tourism. So, how were they able to totally lopside the whole argument, or rather the economy in their favor?
I think it's a good question, but short answers are sort of fraught with danger. Let me try and provide you with some basic sound bites. Dubai is a very dynamic place. It has always aspired to be the hub of goods and services trade in concentric manner for the Arab world, for Southeast Asia, for Asia, Africa, and beyond globally. it has a leadership which is Al Maktoum's tribe, Sheikh of that tribe leads Dubai, and they are very savvy with the ongoing trends. They have good set of advisors who predict the future trends, and they take steps to leverage these trends before they become commonplace. So, artificial intelligence or bitcoins or other areas of Industrial Revolution 4.0, they are ahead of the curve, and once they become they create structures, definitions for that incipient trend, they become natural hub for future activities. So, be it Islamic finance, be it artificial intelligence, be it IT revolution, they have tried to leverage them all. And once you have created such a structure, people want to come and work in your country, work in your emirates, and by being flexible, dynamic and careful listener, you create the right conditions where investments, talent, innovation and entrepreneurship can thrive. Rules are not cast in stone. So, depending on the economic situation of the region, you modify them. Every month or so you get a report that UAE has relaxed its visa conditions, UAE has relaxed its real estate terms, the permanent visas are being given if you invest that much money, and so on. And Dubai would have Expo 2021, Dubai would have this and that. So, that real estate is a dangerous bubble. It has periodicity, it has ups and downs, and right now it is moving up. The efforts are that the real estate created during Dubai Expo is now used profitably. So, the rules are being relaxed, so that the real estate pavilions and housing etc., that was created to cater to the Dubai Expo is now put to proper use, and they are lucky. After all, COVID was a difficult time for Dubai, but tourism collapsed. There were no flights for more than a year, as you remember. There were no cruises, and Dubai suffered. But now it's back with a bang, and I think this is something which sustains it. The dynamism, opportunity, leveraging and so on, and by signing a CEPA with India, with Israel, with a number of other countries, things are sort of spacing out. Now, they also have multiple flashpoints in Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, etc., where wars are going on, civil strife is going on, and there is destruction of assets. Now, eventually political solution would be found, and the assets would have to be rebuilt. Who is going to rebuild it? The money is in Dubai, the projects can be done on sort of loan basis, on easy financing basis, and then again you would have Dubai sort of looking at that opportunity.
All right. So, in 2020, I think India embarked on a very, I think, a first of its kind journey by joining the I2U2 bloc, in which US, India, UAE, and Israel they formed a partnership. And it was a first of its kind in which UAE accepted the integrity of, or basically the nationality of Israel. So, sir, is this move of India's a part of India's foreign policy to be involved in the peace and stability in the Middle East region?
We do it. It cannot be overemphasized. We have 7 million to 9 million Indians living in that region, contributing about $50 billion remittances every year. We get 2/3 of our oil. You have already given the trade figures, which is nearly 1/3 of India's foreign trade. So, all that put together shows that India is second largest trading partner of that region. India has largest number of foreigners in that region, and India is 2/3 dependent on crude from that region. So, we have vital stakes, and these stakes need to be preserved. In the past, we have sought to preserve by being neutral in whatever was going on in the region, depending on their local consensus. The local people, local government should evolve a consensus, and we will support that consensus. But right now, we are going a bit beyond, and we see which side of bread is buttered, and we weigh that consideration. So, I2U2 is where we think we can add or contribute to the stability politically, strategically to that important region, and where US remains the dominant power, protector of the GCC countries, etc. Israel is a new entrant after Abraham Accords with that region, and India, as I mentioned, has its own strong bonds, particularly with the GCC states. So, it is a natural fit.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sachdev. Since you will be running out of time, so I won't want to keep you here any longer, but as our viewers have just heard Mr. Sachdev's wisdom about India's relationship with the Act East and the Lucas policy, and also India in the Middle East, and how there are avenues for India to work on, and also a little bit out of this conversation in which we spoke with Ambassador Sachdev, his idea is basically in the sense as to if a country's got a more flexible foreign policy depending on that particular country's needs, I think development and economic boost is bound to happen. And also sir also gave us an outlook as to how tribalism too plays a big role in the power struggle there in the Middle East, and how India plays an important role, or rather how symbiotic the relationship between West Asia and India is. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sachdev, for giving us your precious time on Hornbill TV, and we hope that you'll be back to Nagaland again for Hornbill 2.0 in your life, maybe, sir.
Pleasure.
Anyway, sir, I hope wherever you're going, you take a part of Nagaland with you. For more interviews like this, keep tuning into Hornbill TV.